Hi everyone, so today's webinar is going to be on the metabolism and basal metabolic rate. So metabolism is the definition of all chemical processes that occur in the body that are necessary to maintain life. So there's really two key processes that are involved in metabolism, and that's catabolism and anabolism. So catabolism is where you break down substances into simpler substances. So this is your digestion. This is breaking carbohydrates down into glucose or your lipids into glycerol and fatty acids. And anabolism is where you actually take those basic molecules that you broke down during catabolism and you build them up into larger ones. So proteins that are broken down through catabolism into amino acids that are then used, those amino acids are then used to build up protein in body tissue. So energy is usually released during the catabolic reaction, and that energy is adenosine triphosphate, which is a universal energy that can be used in all types of processes throughout the body. So if we have a look at carbohydrate metabolism, we start with carbohydrates. They're broken down into our monosaccharides, and then they can be used for either blood glucose, they can be used in the cells as ATP, or they can be stored as excess glycogen or converted into fat and stored as adipose tissue. Now that store of energy can be broken down if we need it, depending on the body's needs. So lipids are digested into glycerol and fatty acids and then metabolized in the liver to form what's called acetic acid, and that can then be used for for cells. So that can either be for cell membranes, for insulation, or ATP if there's not enough glucose available. So proteins are broken down into the amino acids and are then used in the cells either to build and repair body tissue or as an alternative source of energy if there's not enough glucose or lipids available in the body for an energy source. So we really do need to store some of the energy that we consume and convert and break down through catabolism because we need that energy when our body requires a greater energy output or if we have a time where we don't have any access to any food. So the storage of that energy can either occur as glycogen or as triglyceride fat. So if your energy consumption equals your energy expenditure, then the energy needs are being met and balanced, and you won't see any storing of energy or use of energy from stores. So there are a whole bunch of reasons that the body needs that energy and will use it for whole types of different bodily processes. So maintaining body temperature, for brain or cell transmissions, for movement or for digestion. And the energy is either transferred from one form to another depending on what your body needs and the processes that it requires to maintain life and all those bodily processes. So to calculate your energy balance, you need to work out how much food you're taking in. And you do that like we've been doing with Chronometer, where you list all your food and beverages and then using your kilojoule tables or your computer software, in this case Chronometer, you calculate the energy value of the foods that you've consumed. And then you calculate the total energy that you've expended throughout the day. And that includes your basal metabolic rate, which is BMR, as well as the thermic effect of food and any kilojoule expenditure for various daily activities like running, walking, rowing, going to the gym, any form of exercise basically. So if you have a greater energy input than you do output, you end up with what's called a positive energy balance, and that will lead to an increase of storage of weight and you will gain weight. However, if your energy input is less than your energy output, your body will actually access stored energy in the form of tissue and it will break that down for energy and you tend to lose weight. If you have what we call an energy equilibrium, that's where the energy intake equals the energy output, and therefore you will maintain weight. So about 30% of energy that you consume is used for physical activity, and the other 70% is used for all other metabolic processes. So these metabolic processes are collectively known as BMR, or basal metabolic rate, and that's the minimum amount of energy used to maintain a normal body temperature and muscle tone, to keep the heart beating and all other vital organs functioning at a resting state. Now, you need to know this definition, so you should be writing that down. So a BMR will be different for males versus females because they're not biologically the same. So in females, 1 kilo of body weight will burn roughly 0.9 of a calorie per hour, whereas for males, it'll roughly burn 1 calorie per hour. Now, the calculating BMR is the weight multiplied by how much 1 kilo burns per hour times by 24 hours, because we're working out a BMR based on one day, and that will give us a number in calories. Now, we only deal with kilojoules, so to convert calories to kilojoules, you need to multiply by 4.2, and that will then tell you how many kilojoules you're burning per day based on your basal metabolic rate. Now, that doesn't include exercise or the thermic effect of food, which we'll be going into in more detail later. So there are a whole bunch of factors that affect BMR. So males tend to have a higher BMR than females as a rule. Body size, the larger the body size, the greater the BMR due to an increase in energy demands. If you have more muscle, you will have a higher BMR because muscle actually requires energy for that muscle tissue to be maintained, whereas fat doesn't actually require any energy. So if you, that's why males tend to have a higher BMR than females, is because they have a higher muscle mass compared to females. So hormonal conditions will also affect your BMR. So if you're pregnant, you will have an increased BMR, and if you have an overactive thyroid, you will also have an increased BMR. Other factors that affect BMR include infection and illness, because your body is working harder to fight off an infection, and that requires energy. If you're fasting, your BMR will actually be decreased, because what your body will do is it will go into survival mode, and it will try to conserve energy to help use most of that energy for vital organs. So that's why fasting diets don't actually work long term, because your BMR will just adjust to allow for the fact that you're not consuming as many calories as you used to. Certain drugs will actually affect your BMR as well. Caffeine and nicotine increase your BMR, whereas antidepressants and leisure or prescription drugs will actually decrease your BMR. Now, if you live in a climatic extreme, whether that be hot or cold, you will actually find that your BMR will increase as well, because your body is using more energy to stabilize its body temperature. As you increase in age, your BMR will decrease, and that's because you have less activity and you'll have a decrease in muscle mass. And if you exercise, your BMR will increase as well. So thermic effect of food is another type of energy expenditure, and it's the energy that is used for digesting, absorbing, and breaking down your ingested nutrients. And it's roughly 10% of the energy that you take in. So if you've got a total of 8,700 kilojoules, your thermic effect of food will be 870, because you just divide that number by 10. So if we were to do a calculation of working out the energy balance of a 73 kilogram female consuming 8,500 kilojoules, and she's also done a little bit of exercise as well. So firstly, we need to work out the BMR. So that's the weight multiplied by the percent of calorie burnt per hour by 1 kilo of muscle, times by the hours in the day, which is 24, and then you multiply this number by 4.2 to convert it from calories to kilojoules. So that gives us a BMR of 6,623 kilojoules. Now, the thermic effect of food is 10% of the total amount of energy consumed, which in this case is 8,500 kilojoules. So the total expenditure of energy is your BMR plus your thermic effect of food plus any exercise. So this female walked for 30 minutes, that burnt 462 kilojoules, plus a 60-minute cycle which burnt 1,344 kilojoules. Now, 1344 plus 462 equals 1806, which is where that number has came from. So you add all three together and you get a total of energy expenditure of 9,279 kilojoules. Now, to work out the energy balance, you have the total amount of energy consumed minus the energy expenditure, which gives us a negative of 779 kilojoules. So the question is, what does this actually mean? What this means is that this person is consuming less than they're burning, which means over a time they're going to be in a kilojoule or energy deficit, which means their body is actually going to start accessing stored energy in either the form of glycogen or adipose tissue and breaking that down, which means that you will actually see over a longer period of time a decrease in weight. So BMI is your body mass index, and it's the measure of energy store that's also then corrected for height. Now the calculation I'll go to on the next page. Now the one issue about using BMI as a way of looking at whether someone is classified as with healthy weight range or overweight or obese is that it doesn't take into account the ratio of muscle to fat that a person may have. So if you're an athlete or a weightlifter, you might be classified as overweight or obese based on a BMI alone because you weigh quite a lot. Now, that's because muscle mass weighs more than fat. So you shouldn't ever use BMI by itself as an indicator of whether you are at a healthy weight or not. And we'll go into that later in one of the other topics. So here's a calculation. So it's weight in kilograms divided by height squared in meters. So if we were to calculate the BMI of a female that weighs 68 kilos and is 165 centimeters tall, we need to then convert the height into meters. So 165 centimeters equals 1.65 meters. And we would then have the weight divided by the meters squared, which gives us a BMI of 25. And then you will always be given a BMI table or graph to compare that BMI against. So in this case, that female is actually just slightly overweight in the overweight range. Now that may be that she is um, has slightly more muscle mass, or but again, we wouldn't use BMI alone to calculate whether someone is at a healthy weight range or not.